Hondo knew something had changed before anyone spoke to him. The camp felt tighter. Not louder. Quieter, if anything, but with purpose. Engines had been run and shut down. Radios checked and silenced. Men who'd been standing around earlier now had places to be. Movement without confusion. That meant something had gone right. Evans found him near the fire ring just after dusk, hands clasped behind his back like he was taking an evening walk. "You hear about the road?" Evans asked. Hondo didn't look up. "Heard engines earlier." Evans nodded. "Good ears." He let that sit a moment, then continued casual. "We redirected a couple people today. Nobody hurt. Message landed clean." Hondo's jaw tightened. "You didn't bring me here to talk about traffic." Evans smiled faintly. "No, but it tells me how fast information travels." He motioned for Hondo to walk with him. No guards flanking them. No weapons drawn. Just two men moving along the edge of camp where the trees swallowed most of the light. "You ever notice," Evans said, "how vehicles tell you more about a man than his words?" Hondo stopped walking. Evans kept going a step, then stopped too. "That power wagon of yours," Evans went on, tone still even, wasn't thrown together. "Welded brush guard. Winch mounted clean. Tires chosen for mud, not mudding. You didn't build it to look tough." Hondo felt the shift inside his chest, slow, heavy. "You built it to get home." Evans turned to face him now. "White truck like that stands out," Evans said. "Not many left running. Fewer still driven the way you drove it." Hondo kept his voice flat. "You said you lost it." "We did," Evans agreed. "That night." A pause. "Doesn't mean we forgot it." Hondo's eyes flicked up. "You found it again." Evans studied him carefully. "No, not yet. But roads lead places," Evans continued. "And people who don't wander usually come from somewhere specific." Hondo's mind was already racing ahead of the words. A farmhouse. A driveway. A stretch of road that shouldn't matter, until it did. Evans tilted his head slightly. "You went dark after the trees. Smart. But you came back out close to settled land. Someone else noticed that." "Who?" Hondo asked. Evans shrugged. "Civilians. Patrols. Folks who talk." Hondo's hands clenched slowly. "Relax," Evans said. "I'm not saying we're knocking on doors. Not yet. But control works best when people believe we could." The silence stretched. "You got family," Evans said. "That truck tells me that much. So here's what I want you to understand." He stepped closer, lowering his voice, not threatening, just precise. "What happens on the roads keeps people alive. What happens off them depends on cooperation." Hondo met his eyes now, fire in them. "You using my people to make a point?" Evans didn't blink. "I'm telling you points already exist. I decide whether they get sharpened." For the first time since waking in a camp, Hondo felt something colder than pain. Fear not for himself. For Annie. For Lane. For a farmhouse that didn't know it had become a landmark. "You let me stay," Hondo said slowly, "because you want me calm." Evans nodded. "I want you honest." "And if I'm not?" Evans' expression hardened just enough to matter. "Then I start asking questions closer to home." They stood there, the sounds of the camp distant now, swallowed by the trees. Hondo thought of a road demonstration, of people being turned around, not harmed, just educated, of how fast that education would travel. "You're not restoring order," Hondo said quietly. "You're building leverage." Evans smiled, but this time there was no warmth in it. "Order," he said, "is leverage." He turned and walked back toward the camp lights, leaving Hondo alone in the dark, staring into the woods. For the first time since being captured, Hondo wasn't thinking about escape. He was thinking about time, and whether Annie had any left before Evans' roads started pointing the wrong way. You said you knew engines, Evans said, watching him from a few steps back as Hondo knelt beside a patrol truck with a rough idle. I know when they're lying, Hondo replied. Evans gave a faint smile. Show me. Hondo popped the hood, hands moving easy, confident. He didn't rush. Didn't perform. He listened. Touched. Adjusted. You're running her lean, Hondo said. She'll start fine. Run fine. Then die when you need her most. One of the men frowned. She ran yesterday. Yesterday ain't today, Hondo said. Evans nodded. Fix it. Hondo did, mostly. He corrected the obvious problem. Cleaned the connection everyone could see. Then, with a movement so small it barely registered, he reseated a secondary ground just loose enough that vibration would work it free again. Not now. Not soon. Later. One truck. Then another. He didn't sabotage everything. That would get noticed. He touched just enough to create doubt. Intermittent problems were the worst kind. By midday, Evans was walking with him again. You're calm, Evans said. Most men in your position aren't. Hondo wiped his hands on a rag. Panickin wastes energy. Evans studied him. You always this patient. Hondo met his gaze. Only when I got something worth waiting for. Evans nodded slowly, missing the edge beneath the words. That same afternoon, a patrol truck rolled slow past the turnoff near Cheyenne and Dillon's place. Didn't stop. Didn't block the road. Just drove by. Cheyenne watched from the tree line, heart pounding, counting men, counting weapons, memorizing the sound of the engine. It's closer, Dillon said quietly. Yeah, Cheyenne replied. But they're still looking. Not knocking. Back at the farmhouse, Annie felt it before anyone said a word. Atlas stood, hackles just barely raised, eyes fixed toward the distant road. They're nearby, Annie said. Ramona nodded. Pressure before presence. Tony's jaw tightened. That's Evans' way. Annie swallowed, steadying herself. Hondo, wherever he was buying them time. She didn't know how, but she felt it. That night, a patrol reported a truck that died halfway through rotation. Nothing dramatic. Just wouldn't restart. Another truck ran hot. Another radio cut out for a minute, then came back. Small things. Evans stood at the edge of camp, hands behind his back, eyes narrowed, not angry but alert. Coincidences stack, he said quietly. From across the camp, Hondo sat on a crate, head down, hands dirty, looking like a man grateful to be useful. Inside, he counted. Not trucks. Not radios. Time. His grandfather's voice came back again, calm as ever. You don't break a machine to stop it, the old man had said. You just make it unreliable. Hondo looked toward the dark tree line, toward a farmhouse that didn't know how close danger had crept. Not yet. And if he had his way. Not today. The truck died at the wrong time. That was the problem. Patrol 3 had just cleared the north marker when the engine coughed once hard, then dropped into a sputtering idle that refused to smooth out. The driver feathered the throttle, listening, frowning. Come on, he muttered. The radio crackled. Status. Hold, the driver replied. Gotta. The engine cut completely. Silence rushed in around them, thick and sudden. They tried again. Starter clicked. Nothing else. Damn it, the passenger said, already climbing out. Back at camp, the report landed like a stone in still water. Evans didn't raise his voice. Didn't move fast. Which truck? He asked. 3, the radio operator replied. Same one Hondo worked on yesterday. Evans' eyes flicked up. Just once. Send a recovery vehicle, he said calmly. And keep radios open. That was the mistake. The camp shifted, subtle, distracted. Men moved. Attention bent outward instead of inward. And for exactly 90 seconds, nobody was watching the auxiliary radio tent. Hondo was. He moved like he belonged there. Rag in one hand. Head down. No hurry. He stepped inside the tent as if checking a connection, reached the set, and keyed the mic just long enough to speak. Low. Controlled. 2 guns, he said. Static. Then barely audible. Say again. Hondo swallowed. Tony. It's Hondo. At Tony and Ramona's place, the kitchen still smelled like coffee and dust. Annie stood near the table, arms wrapped around herself, listening as Tony talked through the barn layout. What could be moved, what could be hidden, how the power wagon could disappear if it had to. Backstall's old, Tony said. Tin roof. From the road, it just looks collapsed. We can roll her in at night. Ramona nodded. It's smart. Annie nodded too, but her mind was elsewhere. Always elsewhere. She just stepped out onto the porch, the screen door easing shut behind her when Tony froze mid-sentence inside. The radio. It hissed once, sharp and sudden. Tony crossed the room in 3 strides. 2 guns, the voice said again. Faint. Breaking. You copy. Annie turned so fast she nearly stumbled. Tony's hand hovered over the radio, then pressed in. I copy. There was a pause, long enough to hurt. Hondo. Annie whispered. Hondo, Tony said, voice tight. Static crackled. Then. I don't got long, Hondo said. They're organized. Real organized. Roads are controlled, not blocked. They're watching patterns. Not faces. Annie's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. I'm alive, Hondo continued. Not hurt bad. Listen to me. Don't keep the truck where it can be seen. White stands out. Move it. Hide it. Tony nodded even though Hondo couldn't see him. We're already on it. Good, Hondo said. That buys time. Annie leaned toward the radio, voice shaking. Hondo, it's me. The silence that followed nearly broke her. Annie, Hondo said softly. Just her name. Nothing else. I need you, she said. No strength left to pretend otherwise. I know, he replied. I'm working it. You hear me? She nodded, tears spilling free now. I hear you. Hug Lane for me, Hondo said, and don't wait where you can be found. The radio popped. Static surged. Hondo. Tony said sharply. Nothing. The radio went dead. Annie stood there, shaking, hand pressed flat against the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Ramona came up beside her, steady and quiet. He gave you something, she said. Annie nodded, wiping her face. He's still fighting, Annie said. Just not the way they expect. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Not waiting. Moving. Annie didn't let the silence linger. The truck moves tonight, she said. Not loud. Not emotional. Certain. Tony nodded immediately. I'll get the lights killed in the back pasture. We'll roll her dark. Dylan was already on his feet. I'll bring my trailer. Less engine noise if we coast the last stretch. Cheyenne grabbed her jacket. I'll walk the road first. Make sure no one's marking anything. Nobody questioned it. This wasn't panic. This was execution. Ramona touched Annie's arm gently. He didn't just warn you, she said. He trusted you. Annie swallowed, then nodded once. I won't waste it. Outside, Atlas paced tight circles, restless, reading the shift in the air before any of them spoke again. Lane stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mom, he asked. Annie knelt in front of him, gripping his shoulders. We're just moving the truck for a bit, okay? You stay close to Ramona. Lane nodded, trusting her the way kids do, without understanding how fragile that trust really was. By the time the sun dipped below the trees, the power wagon was already rolling. No headlights. No voices. Just hands on metal and breath held tight as they eased it into Tony's old barn, past rusted equipment and broken stalls, settling it beneath a sagging tin roof that looked ready to cave in. White paint disappeared into shadow. Annie stood there afterward, hand on the hood, feeling the warmth still trapped beneath the steel. Get home, she thought. Back at the camp, Hondo felt the shift before the shouting started. A radio squawked once. Then again. AUX channel's been keyed, someone said. Just briefly. Evans was already moving. How long, he asked. Under a minute. Evans stopped walking. That was too long. He looked across the camp, eyes sweeping, not at men, but at patterns. At who had reason to be near what. At who'd been trusted with small freedoms. His gaze landed on Hondo. Not accusing. Evaluating. Hondo didn't react. He kept his head down, hands dirty, posture relaxed. But inside, the clock was screaming. He'd known this was the cost. Small windows always closed. Evans approached slowly, voice low. You hear anything interesting today? No, Hondo said easily. Just engines. Evans studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Funny thing about radios, he said. They don't speak unless someone tells them to. Hondo met his eyes. Same as people. Evans smiled thinly. Exactly. He turned away, but not before adding, if someone used our air, they didn't get far. Hondo's jaw tightened just enough to feel. Because Evans was wrong. They had. Dink and Joyce sat at the kitchen table again. They hadn't moved much since dinner. 2 cups between them. Neither one touched. Annie poured herself coffee she didn't need and joined them. Joyce was the first to speak. He reached out. Annie nodded. Just long enough. Dink stared into his cup. That means he's thinking ahead. He always does, and he said. Dink rubbed a hand over his beard slow. I've been quiet, he said. Didn't know if my thoughts were worth adding. Annie looked at him. They are. He nodded once, then sighed. That militia, they ain't Russian, 'cause they don't have to. Same way a farmer don't chase a calf. He just fences it tighter. Joyce glanced at him, then back at Annie. Your husband knows that, she said. That's why he's buying you time instead of breaking out guns blazing. Annie stared at the table, at the old scratches in the wood. Time for what? Joyce met her eyes. For you to be ready when waiting stops working. Dink cleared his throat. And for folks like us to decide what we're willing to risk. Annie let that sit. Dink and Joyce sat at the kitchen table again. They hadn't moved much since dinner. 2 cups between them. Neither one touched. Annie poured herself coffee she didn't need and joined them. Joyce was the first to speak. He reached out. Annie nodded. Just long enough. Dink stared into his cup. That means he's thinking ahead. He always does, and he said. Dink rubbed a hand over his beard slow. I've been quiet, he said. Didn't know if my thoughts were worth adding. Annie looked at him. They are. He nodded once, then sighed. That militia, they ain't Russian, 'cause they don't have to. Same way a farmer don't chase a calf. He just fences it tighter. Joyce glanced at him, then back at Annie. Your husband knows that, she said. That's why he's buying you time instead of breaking out guns blazing. Annie stared at the table, at the old scratches in the wood. Time for what? Joyce met her eyes. For you to be ready when waiting stops working. Dink cleared his throat. And for folks like us to decide what we're willing to risk. Annie let that sit.